Hi everybody. Welcome to our session today on effective capacity planning of your infrastructure resources. My name is Gordon McKenna. I'm CEO of Inframon.
And my name is Cameron Fuller. I'm a principal consultant with Catapult Systems.
And we are System Center Cloud and Data Center Management MVPs. We got it right.
Hey, we saved it. You know how many times we had to practice that. All right. So I think we should start up the presentation here pretty quickly, but where's my audio? We have no audio.
Just bear with us 2 seconds. Let's go back a slide.
Hold on. We have no audio in the back off of our laptop here. Just FYI. Let's try that again. There we go. A little bit less surprising this time. Go ahead.
Hey, you can put your link on Disturb. Come on.
Would you rather he walked in? That's what he did last time.
Good morning, sir. It's a really bad time. Any chance we could talk later?
If you want to continue to be employed, we need to talk now.
But sir, we're presenting at the Microsoft Management Summit right now.
Don't care. This is more important. Our customers say our application is running slow.
Servers look fine, sir.
Our application is running slow and it runs our business. Do you have enough server capacity?
That's you, man. What do you think? Enough servers? I think
our application is still running slow. Fix it. Also, the board met today. We need 4 nines, not 3 nines in our core SLAs. However, personally, I think we need to aim higher. I want 4 10s, not 4 nines.
Okay.
I saw that. I'll call you in an hour.
Oh dear.
All right.
Can't get away from him.
True enough. All right, so what we'd like to be able to do today, we wanted to use that as kind of a humorous introduction to get you a chance to really think about what we're looking at here. You know, some of us have great bosses, some of us have challenging bosses. Obviously, actually, that was one of my bosses, so there's a lot of history and a lot of humor to that. So let me give you the agenda of what we got today. So we're going to start with kind of an analysis of issues. We're going to do a walkthrough, what is capacity planning. We've got some great demos planned for you today around collecting the data and measuring and publishing the data. And then we're going to move into some forecasting pieces. So what we're going to start with, the major flow of the deck here is going to be working around Gordon, and we've got a special guest presenter who's going to come up and help us out with that. And then in addition to that, once we've gone through the whole story from the Microsoft solution perspective, we're going to augment that with some of the other vendors that are here and actually let them showcase their solutions for you and show how they can take capacity planning to the next step with System Center.
Okay, so how many people have had a call like that we had at the beginning? Yeah, hands up from their bosses. Yeah, it's pretty common, you know, and it's basically execs who don't understand what we do, demanding to know information about capacity. So, you know, if you analyze that a little bit, you know, we were portraying a very typical customer, for example, that both Cameron and I meet on a regular basis. You know, that customer typically has no formal capacity planning function and really an overall inability to measure key metrics within an organization. They cannot scorecard against defined targets, quite typically. And, you know, that means that they're unable to accurately predict capacity and future performance. Now, this lack of a framework and lack of a reporting mechanism generally leads to decisions being made not based on facts. So decisions based on guesstimates or what people kind of feel. And this typically quite often leads to bad budget decisions. So we've probably, quite a lot of us in the room there have been that. And these bad decisions can lead to things like budgets overruns, you know, where we spend too much money on a project, or in fact budget overruns, where we've actually put money against a project and we haven't spent everything in the part. And quite frankly, these customers are often flying in the dark when it comes to capacity planning. So, you know, what is capacity planning? So, you know, let's have a quick high-level view. So, how many people in the room have implemented MOF, Microsoft Operations Framework? Okay, a few in the front row. And what about ITIL? How many people have implemented ITIL in the organization? That's good. So between those two, about half the room. So you know, if we look at capacity planning, there's basically three main functions to it. We have business capacity planning, service capacity planning, and component capacity planning. So business capacity planning is where we take input from the business. And, you know, quite often that's with regards to growth, new personnel that are coming on, maybe mergers or acquisitions that are going to happen over a period of time. And we're taking those elements in. And, you know, that might have an impact, for example, on a critical application like Exchange, you know, where we're planning to add growth to that. And we're maybe putting that in and we're trying to understand what the growth is going to be over a period of time. Secondly, we have service capacity planning. So this is where we look at applications being used by the business from a holistic point of view. And we look at the information contained within those services and we withdraw capacity from those key service functions. The final one is component capacity planning. So that's where we're actually looking at individual elements like disk and CPU and memory, and we're actually pulling information off. And we might use a tool like Operations Manager, for example, to pull this data from those key components and store it in a SQL database. So, you know, key questions when embarking on any capacity planning project, and these are the things that you should be asking yourself when you're laying down your foundations for capacity planning. So firstly, what are the future plans of the business? You know, what elements in the business roadmap are going to affect your calculations in the long term? You know, as well as understanding what will affect the business in the long term, you need to properly understand how the business actually uses the IT function. So in a lot of organizations, we have things which are called service peaks. So if you look at a typical sales organization, when we get close to a quarter end, you know, we might have a peak in the usage of a key sales application. And as well as understanding elements like sales peaks, we need to understand when applications aren't being used as much so that we can make the right decisions with regards to decommissioning kit or maybe turning machines on and off. Also, historical data. You know, we need to be able to understand what our systems have been doing, what capacity our systems have been running about. And again, we can use tools like Operations Manager for this because we have a very good data warehouse. I often work with a lot of organizations that are saying we have to do capacity planning, we need to go out and buy these tools. And actually, most of the data that you need to do capacity planning already exists in a lot of the tools that you already have in your environment. It's just finding the key ways to surface that data and being able to put it in a format that you can use and analyze and read. So let's look at a couple of capacity planning strategies. So there's three main capacity planning strategies. We have a lead strategy, and this is really kind of what we were looking at in the beginning with that little exercise on the link. This is where we're kind of making, we're adding capacity ahead of time. You know, and this is based on what we think a particular system needs or what we think the business is going to need. It's not based on fact. It's based on best estimates. You know, quite often, this can affect service delivery within an organization, and it can lead to under or over provisioned services. Secondly, we have what we call a lag strategy. And this is a very reactive approach to capacity planning. And this is probably where most people kind of in the room today actually live in their organization with regards to capacity planning. And this is where we physically react to capacity requirements of our systems. So, for example, we might have an Exchange server, it might run out of capacity, and we may add more memory to that or more disk to that Exchange system. Finally, we have what we call a match strategy. So, a match strategy, believe it or not, isn't how the San Francisco 49ers are going to be beating the Green Bay Packers on the first day of the season. It's going to be around basically forecasting and trending. So understanding what we have in our organization, taking key data, and actually using that in an intelligent way that allows us to forecast and trend and make accurate decisions on where we're going with our capacity. So let's look at the management challenge. we all know what the management challenges are typically. It's great me talking about collecting data for planning, but the reality is that many of us work in environments that contain multiple users connecting into multiple locations to access multiple different services. You know, and with the onset of cloud computing, you know, both public and private cloud strategies, it becomes even more complicated to collect the data. We now typically have to manage things like software as a service, elements like Office 365, applications and components that might live within a PaaS environment, for example, in Azure. And we need to find ways of being able to collect and publish that data from multiple endpoints and multiple different locations. Okay, so let's look at service components. That's a bit of a complicated slide I've got up there. And, you know, service components are complicated elements that we manage within our environments. You know, quite often, you know, the modern data center, it's not just Windows services and Windows components that we're having to manage. You know, we have to collect data from Unix and Linux, storage devices, network components, you know, and these are quite often delivered across multiple different platforms and from multiple different environments. So I'm going to hand you over now, after just setting the scene a little bit, to Cameron, who's going to talk a little bit about why we think Operations Manager is the perfect tool to start you down this route.
Thank you, Gordon. I appreciate it, man. And it's ironic because both Gordon or I could talk to this slide very, very well because he knows a heck of a lot about Operations Manager as well. But I get a chance to be able to point out a few of my favorite things related to it. So first off, the number one question related to when somebody asks, you know, what does Operations Manager really do? To me, it bullet points exactly with what we've got listed here. It's providing a monitoring framework which is proactive in nature. I know this is an overused analogy, but it's a really good one, so I'm going to continue to use it. So I would far rather know 5 minutes before I run out of disk space associated with my Exchange server than 5 minutes after. Obviously, I'm not going to get slammed with email at that point in time, but my phone is going to probably go off the hook. So it's important to be proactive and to be thinking about these things. We pull it all together. We can pull together applications, we can pull together servers, and we can pull together network devices all into this common framework that we're working from. And gathering that information is one piece of it, but the most important piece of it is being able to faster resolve problems when they've been found. So if I've got an issue that's occurring, I can use the product knowledge that's built into Operations Manager to actually go in, more quickly resolve and fix the issue that's occurring. So that's a really good benefit associated with it. From an architectural perspective, we'll hit this on the next slide as well, but just so for those who are not familiar with Ops Manager, actually let me ask that first. How many people in here are not familiar with Operations Manager architecture? Raise your hands. All right, there's like 4. Okay, so I'm going to go really fast on this. How about that? All right, Ops Manager has agents that we deploy. Those agents go to the different systems. They report back. We have management packs. Management packs contain information, all that product knowledge and the rest of it. And we use things like distributed applications, which we'll talk about here in more detail, synthetic applications, and the rest. The architecture, again, kind of looks like this. We have a series of different monitored clients that are reporting to management servers. Different monitored servers can report to different management servers. We have SQL databases that actually provide both the operational database as well as the data warehouse, and then we have a reporting services box. Now, obviously, these can be co-located, so these are things that all can come together, and for those of you who are doing Ops Manager, you know we've got things like gateways and the rest of it as well, but this is just kind of a high-level look in terms of what Ops Manager architecture really does. Kind of facilitates what we need to be able to gather the information, find problems, and fix them before they become an issue before the environment. All right. With that, we're going to go ahead and take things over to Gordon here, and we're going to go over to, there we go. Going to go over here to Gordon's demo environment and let him show you some of the ideas around collecting the data in Ops Manager.
Thank you, Cameron. So a really good base to start with when you're trying to bring together for your data for your service components is the distributed application designer within Operations Manager. Now, some of these distributed applications are created automatically without the box management packs, as some of you will know. Things like Active Directory, Exchange, Config Manager even create their own distributed application models. Now, I strongly believe that the most powerful component in Operations Manager is the distributed application designer. How many of my customers actually use the distributed application designer in the real world? We've got a few hands going up here. Probably, show of hands, how many people use distributed application designers? So that's probably about 25% of the room. And that's probably what I see out in the field. About 25% of customers use it. But it is by far what Operations Manager was designed to do. It is an end-to-end service monitoring product. And if you get distributed application monitoring right, it can not only be a great base for capacity planning, but it can be a really great way of pinpointing problems that occur in your environment. So I'm just going to open up a distributed application model that I've got within my Operations Manager environment here. And this is actually one that I've created for a BI app that we've got kind of in one of our customer environments. And you can see it's in red, not a good way. But you know, one of the advantages of having this kind of model is when I have an issue with the application, I can actually go up to this path button at the top, and I can actually click it and instantly see where the problem that's occurring in my application. So with this particular application, I've got a problem with the System Center agent, and I can see that that's caused the operating system to be offline. But it's actually showed me a route to where my particular problem is. Now I'm going to just dissect what I've done with the distributed application model here, because I've actually broken it into some key service chunks. And this might actually not be how you typically see these out of the box. So if we look at the services tier within here, I've broken this down into logical elements that represent my application as it's delivered to the business. So I have a back end, a front end, and a middle tier. If I open up my back end, I've got my SQL Server database, and I've actually got my SQL Server DB engine. Now, an interesting thing that I'm doing here is if my database goes offline, I'm rolling up the status of that database to the top of my model. But if my SQL Server DB engine goes offline, I've actually edited the distributed application model so it doesn't roll that status up. Because I absolutely want to know if there's problems with my SQL Server, but if my database is still running, my service is still available. So I've chosen to add that into my distributed application model, but not roll that element up to the top of the stack. And you know what I've also got in here, if I drill down in my back end, I've got my operating system as well. So, and what I might also include in this, if I've got this hooked into Veeam or I've got this hooked into Virtual Machine Manager, I might put my virtual hardware that my SQL database is set upon. I might even add my storage. If I've got it hooked into my NetApp filer, I might even add my storage element under there, and maybe even the network devices that my SQL Server talks under. But the point is that I've modeled these together in a group that represents how my business logically looks at that application. I've got the same kind of thing for front end, where I've got websites obviously there instead, and I've got application pools. And what I've actually got over here on the front end is I've got client experience. How many people forget about client experience when they're modeling applications? And it's one of the most important elements. You know, I need to understand what my user's perception of using the application is. And it's quite funny, if you walk around an organization and you speak about availability to different people, you'll get a different response. If you speak about availability to an application team, they'll tell you it's whether their SQL databases or their iOS websites are running and are available. But if you speak to a service delivery manager, he'll say it's whether or not my users can access that application. So being able to bring those elements together, and in this instance, I've actually just put a desktop PC in each of the locations where my end user sits, and I'm actually just running a website check against that front end. And what that actually shows me in my DAB model, when there's an issue that goes down, it shows me what the business impact of my service being down. So with this particular one, even though my System Center agent is down, I know that my users are still accessing my application. And what I've actually used in the middle here, I've got a network tier, and I'm actually using the best network management tool known to man. Does anybody know what that is? Users? Anybody else? Ping. ICMP ping, prize to that man. So I'm actually running an ICMP ping, and it's just a little freebie OpsLogic ping script that I've downloaded and I'm using. And I'm actually just running synthetic transactions from that same location where my end user is, so that I can compare the data. I can see whether my user transaction is actually being impacted by latency on the network. Now, all of this data together performs a very good base for my capacity planning, because I'm interested in capacity planning from a service perspective. And what I'm doing naturally by creating this distributed application model is grouping together all of the key metrics that I need to be able to do capacity planning against that key application. Now, other quick things in here that I can use within Operations Manager to collect key metrics are service level tracking objects. So these are elements that I can create, and you can see that I've got one for my, my CIO-BI application there. And service level tracking metrics allow me to set SLAs against things like distributed application models. So for this particular one, I'm actually tracking some objects against that distributed application model that you've just looked at. And I'm looking at availability. Well, I know my boss asked for 10s. Nobody gets 10s. So I'm going to do a 99.0, and I'll argue the case with him later. But I'm actually doing availability and performance. And the great thing is, those distributed application models understand which metrics in the model are availability and which are performance. My SQL database going offline is an availability metric. My application is off. But my SQL database running out of disk space is a performance-related issue because it's not having a service impact on my database. So very good ways of coming in and tracking the metrics.
But for our boss's example, so we could, I mean, very simply as an example, just open that up and take our 2 9s, put a couple more 9s on it, and bump that up, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, let's do that now.
All right.
Let's just kind of change that to a 10.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, we'll definitely get some errors on that one then. That'll be good. All right, so no downtime ever for anything. So this doesn't guarantee high availability. It just says that that's what we're going to be tracked against.
Yeah, and then obviously I can change that within there accordingly. And then, you know, I'm changing those metrics to meet my individual needs within the business. Okay, so very quick demo, and I know some of you know Operations Manager, but a very quick way. Definitely my recommendation, if you can get your head into distributed application model, a very powerful way to both understand what's going on with your services and to collect data around that. So with that, I'm going to pass you over to Sean Roberts, who's actually the Chief Innovation Officer at Inframon. And Sean's going to get a little bit deeper into how we take this data that we're collecting in those distributed application models, and we actually turn it into something that we can begin to do a capacity planning function against.
Okay. We'll keep it on the slide deck because I've got a few slides to go through. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'll be going a lot deeper into Operations Manager, into the Operations Manager data warehouse to show you how you can pull some of the information out. And then I'll be showing you how you can feed that into SQL Server analysis services and publish it up into SharePoint 2013 using Performance Point. Who here, as a show of hands, is comfortable in SQL? Who here loves SQL? Hey, all right, if you love SQL, you're going to love this bit. We'll start off with a bit of SQL, we'll go deep, we'll come back up for air, and then get up into the fluffy stuff that's going to keep the boss happy. So when we're doing our capacity planning, we have 4 key steps that we need to follow. Obviously, we talked about collecting the data. Operations Manager is that tool for that. We then need to look at measuring the data, and we're going to be using SQL Server Analysis Services 2012 for that, publishing it up using SharePoint, and then forecasting at the very end using analysis services and data mining algorithms within analysis services. At a high level, what I'm showing you today looks like this. So we have 4 key users on the right, 4 key use cases. We have our IT operators who are interested in the default reports and probably interested in the Ops Manager dashboards a bit. We have the IT analysts who would then go and build their own custom reports. This might be with Excel, it might be with reporting services perhaps. We then have the analysis piece, which is the piece we're going to be doing with the Performance Point. IT managers and IT analysts are interested in that. And then executives are very much interested in the top high-level dashboards. So the key components of these 3 building blocks. So Ops Manager is collecting, as I mentioned, analysis services comes together for the analysis and the forecasting, and then the publishing is with the SharePoint Performance Point. So the Operations Manager data warehouse is where the data is stored. So Cameron, maybe you could tell me where is the best place to pull off information?
Well, I can tell you one example of a client that I worked with that kind of went to the other side of the spectrum, and I appreciate you asking that. They actually decided to run all of their analytics directly off the Operations Manager database as opposed to off the Operations Manager data warehouse. So for anybody out there who does a lot of operation manager work, I mean, you can't really work that database in that way. So what the result was, in essence, is you walk into their data center and they had this great wall of all these great charts that they were putting up and all the rest of it, which was really impressive to be able to see. But what was happening behind the scenes was they were getting locking on a regular basis. The console was becoming completely unresponsive and the rest of it. So long story made short, and I'm sure Sean will go into far more in terms of what is best practice, but definitely not reading data for performance out of the operations manager database, using the data warehouse and using views, things of that nature, far more scalable, far more effective.
Yep. Thanks, Cameron. And in fact, supported. So it is unsupported querying the Ops Manager database. So always go to the data warehouse. The data warehouse is a live data warehouse. So data is written to it at the same time as it is written into the Ops DB. So you're going to find all your information in there. There's 4 key areas that come out of the box that are schemas within the database. We have alert schema, which collects information about alerts. We have the performance schema, obviously for performance collection. State, which is measuring our time in state, and our events. Now, each of these schemas come in multiple different aggregates as well. So we have a raw aggregate, which is the raw data going in. It is then, at the end of the hour, calculated into an hourly summary, and then calculated at the end of the day into a daily summary. Now, depending upon how big your data warehouse is and how much information you're going in there, you'll find that lag for the aggregations between 5 and 15 minutes after the end point of the hour. One area that people always come unstuck with the gotcha is Ops Manager has what's called in a optimized data collection. And so what optimized data collection is when a performance counter is captured, if that doesn't vary by a predefined amount, then that data won't be stamped into the Ops Manager data warehouse. So you will find, if you're pulling off graphs off a highly optimized data point, that there will be big gaps in there. Now, if this is something that you're collecting, like if you've written something bespoke, for instance, you should tune that down to make sure you get that data point in there. State information is another area where this comes back, where Ops Manager treats no information as good information. So if there's no state data collected in the Ops data warehouse, then you assume that it is healthy. If an object then changes state, that state data, every time, for the whole time it's in red, it will be stamped in there as red, 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 yellow, yellow, and then 2 more hours after that it will stamp green, green, and then it will stop collecting that information. And that was put in primarily for all the pain some of us may have felt in MOM 2005 with the database growing so big. And this was put in, and that's why we get such better performance. Ops Manager also in the data warehouse does grooming and table partitioning. So table partitioning has a max number of rows in a table, and you'll see if you open up your tables, you'll see state underscore GUID, state underscore GUID, state underscore GUID. What Ops Manager does is it creates a view on top of that, which is your state v state, or perf v perf view, which performs a union across all those tables. So you should always be querying the views, never query the underlying tables. If you want to get better performance as well when pulling this information out, use the query hint with no lock, which I'll show you in a little bit. Right, so let's have a look at some of the table structures, and I won't hold on these too long because I know that we'll put some of you to sleep. So managed entities, this is the way we go from a managed entity. So within, if we're querying Ops Manager through PowerShell, it's called a monitored object. If we're querying it through the Ops Manager database or data warehouse, it's called a managed entity. So the vManaged entity table stores every single discovered instance of SCOM in it. This relates to the managed entity monitor, so every managed entity has multiple monitors, relates to monitor, and then ultimately relates down to the monitor service level objective management pack version, which stores the different SLA against any monitor base. So take a step back. When we create our service level tracking, we have the option to create one against performance counters or one against state, and this is how we get that state information out. Similarly, we go the same way for performance. Instead, we go from the service level objective to the service level objective management pack version to the performance service level objective management pack. Finally, we have our fact tables. So I've just pulled these up. So we have vAlert, vState hourly, and vPerf hourly are the ones most people query. We also have the raw versions of these tables and the daily versions of these tables. Right, so how do I link my distributed application? So Gordon showed us that we had the distributed application. And one of the reasons Well, there's lots of reasons to use distributed applications, but one of the main reasons in capacity planning is to give us a data domain, so we know what objects belong to which service. So there's two different ways we can link all the objects down to our distributed app. The first one is we need to discover which one it is in the vManage entity table. So if it's been created through the GUI, it will have a managed entity type of %_service, or we can go in and we can see that the managed entity type of the service inherits from the base type of Microsoft System Center Service Designer.service. And I'll show you how you can traverse the inheritance tree. Once we've got the base type or base managed entity for the distributed application, we now need to know what's in it. So for this, we can use, there's a stored procedure built in called DBO Managed Entity Base Type Hierarchy. And if we query that, that will then go and pull out everything that's contained within the distributed application. One little gotcha that you will come across is if we're extracting this out using SAS, SAS by default won't be able to query stored procedures. It can only query SQL commands, SQL queries. So you may have to flatten that data out, or you can load it up using sys. So SQL Server Analysis Services. Who here has any experience with SQL Server Analysis Services? Yeah, okay, a few, right? You come across a number of DBAs that don't even have much experience with SAS. So it is actually a core component of SQL Server, and it hosts what's called OLAP cubes. And OLAP is really designed for aggregating large volumes of data and providing us with slice and dice. So it's great at getting out and looking at two different things across various different time ranges, gives us that aggregated value very, very quickly. It's not very good at pulling out very detailed granular data. It also has inbuilt into it a thing called data mining algorithms. And these are statistical algorithms that we can use on that aggregated data set. And one of them is forecasting. Another one we can actually use that's quite interesting is correlation. So when I was having bad performance, what else was performing bad? So we can start to get an insight into what might be the single point of failure within our environment. Within a cube, we have two key concepts. We have measure groups. These contain measures. A measure is something that we can add up. So it must be a numeric value, and we can do calculated versions of those. We then have dimensions. So these are the things we're going to slice the data by. So if you think of it as like a pivot table, things that we can drop in and pivot around. And in this, the monitored object path, so the path of the computer, the path of the SQL server, that is the sort of things that we put into the dimensions. And these then are pre-aggregated and optimized for our slice and dice. Once we've pulled that data from Ops Manager, we've now got it in the cube, we can then publish it up into SharePoint Performance Services 2013. And this gives us our slice and dice, and it's really, really good for putting on top of Ops Manager, on top of OLAP cubes. We use this over Power Pivot and Power View because typically when we're pulling data out of the OLAP data warehouse, it's very, very big. And Power Pivot and Power View are in-memory structures, and it's too big generally on a decent size environment. It's a click-once application, so it's quite easy for end users to use. So your analysts and those sorts of guys will be able to get in there and use it quite easily. So when we're building our performance point, we have a number of components within performance point. It all sort of starts in the very beginning with an indicator. There's lots of different inbuilt indicators. You can add your own indicators. You can put smiley faces, the whole shebang. Once we have our indicator, we then create our KPI. And our KPI, Key Performance Indicator, compares our actuals against a goal and then displays the indicator that we wanted. We then embed the KPIs into a scorecard, which then measure them against the dimensions. We also have reports, which is your graphs, pie data, data tables, Visio diagrams, and we have filters. And all these things come together into the dashboard. So our dashboard contains scorecards, and our dashboard contains reports, and it contains filters. Right, so I'm just going to jump on over. When we work out which button to press. I thought it was that one. So I was right all along. It was on 2. Right. So we'll just start off here with just some SQL queries quickly for you, just to have a look. I'll just zoom in on you. So remember before I was talking about how do I find out for my managed entity type, for my object, what class it inherits from? Well, we have the DBA-based managed entity type hierarchy. So we can just run this query, putting in the input of the ID, and this is the ID for my managed entity, and it shows me the tree. So at level 1, 2, and 3, the hierarchy of inheritance there. Here's the query for the monitor SLOs. So if I just go down here, and these are all tables on there that we've seen before, just jazzed up a little bit neater. And here we see we have our SLA name, what it is for availability. I've also included a performance one below there, so percent CPU. We see our aggregation methods as well, so average, what the threshold is, and what we desire it to be, under or over. And the one just above it shows us for state, whether or not we're including the yellow state or the red state as downtime. Well, red's always included as downtime, so whether it's yellow or disabled or planned maintenance. We can also pull off the monitors as well. From here, we'll just have a quick look at that. What does a monitor look like? So these are the various different monitors. We see the full name of the object, and if we scroll across, we'll see the roll-up and the availability monitors. So that's traversing that monitor tree that I was talking about before. This is just a quick look at what the perf hourly looks like, top 100. So we have the date time. We see here, this is the time, always UTC time within the Ops Manager Data Warehouse. The performance rule instance, which relates to the performance rule. The managed entity row ID. The number of sample counts in the hour, the average, min, max, average, and standard deviation. This is the state view. So again, for the hour, for this particular managed entity monitor, so the combination of a thing and its monitor, how many milliseconds did it spend? Red, yellow, disabled, planned maintenance, unplanned maintenance. And then finally, if we want to have a look at some alerts, this is where we'll find them. So we'll see the alert name, the alert description, severity and priority, always a good sort of matrix to have a look at, and then the category. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to create a simple OLAP cube. So here I am in Visual Studio, in SQL Server Data Tools, sorry, it's SQL Server Data Tools, skip my mind, formerly known as BIDS, used to be Business Intelligence Studio. So I'll just create a new OLAP project. Right, so we see down here on the right-hand side, we just add a new data source. So this is where we're going to pull the data from. Just put a username in there. Now I create a data source view. So the data source is within my data, from the connection, which objects do I want to add into the cube. So for this one, we'll just do some performance stuff. So we'll start off with vManaged entity. It's the first thing, so we know what it is that we're looking at. And this will just pull this up for me. Right, we'll pull up vperf. We'll just do daily, just so it will build quicker for the demo. We'll do vPerformance rule. And we'll just add vrule as well. Okay. So this is just going to pull in this information so that the cube can pull from it. Now it's mapped these out. Now because we're pulling from the views, it hasn't been able to automatically work out the relationships between the objects. So we just need to quickly pull those relationships together. So rule row ID to rule row ID. And then managed entity goes to perf daily, managed entity. And then we pull across this performance rule instance into there as well. And last but not least, rule goes to performance rule. Right, and then we can just rearrange. Right, so now we've got this pulled out data source together. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to build the cube. We're going to use the wizard for the cube. So I can create a new cube. We're going to say we want to use our existing tables. Now it's asking me for the measure group table. So this is the one with the things in there that we want to sum up. So the perf daily contains the measures in there. These are all the things that it's found within the table that we can sum up. So we've got sample count, average, mid-max, standard deviation. It's automatically now picked up because of the relationships within the data source view that these things here are also potentially dimensions. So we choose next. We'll call this a performance cube. Right. So there's my cube very quickly built. So I'll just jump over, see it's created the dimensions as well. So one thing that we're going to want to look on that is just the path. So I'll just drag these additional attributes over just so we can see them when we build. And then performance rule instance. I'm just going to show my other table, the rule, because we want the rule system name. And then on this one, we'll want the object and the counter. Right. So my cube is now ready to build. So I can just press the build button. Process full. Off we go. We run. Oops. Not quite. Live demos. Yeah, going so well, so close. Right, I know what that is. We'll just jump back over here. Doesn't like that table that I had in that view. So we'll just drop that out for the time being. Right. Come back over here. All right, so off she goes. So she built the cube. Now that data is available. Now I can either open up Visual Studio, SQL Server, Management Studio, and connect to the analysis services on this box and browse it from here, or I could do it from within there. So we see we have the OLAP project. In here is my performance cube. I can right click, I can browse. And then this will now go to this. Now at this point, we can give this information off and someone can start using Excel to start analyzing all this data. Now remember, obviously I've only got a few rows in here, but when you've got thousands of rows or hundreds of thousands of rows, then it becomes quite interesting. So we can drop in here, we can drop in the average value, we can drop in the path, and to see how quickly that was able to aggregate that data up across all those things. What I could also do at a later point is put in, when it works, go put in the name of the rule, so we have the rule in there, so we can filter that down. And we can also put a time dimension on there as well. So very quickly, I've been able to knock up a cube. Now, what I already have actually is a more comprehensive cube, a more comprehensive project that I prepared earlier, which is based upon what I just showed you, but in fact it contains performance, alert, state, and it contains all the various different aggregates. So we see this up on the screen here. We just see more of the cubes down there. So what I'm going to do is, that is already deployed and already running. So I'll show you now how we can then access the cube and build some scorecards and some dashboards off that and publish it up into SharePoint. So here I have SharePoint 2013, the new version. So if I just go to site content, this is deployed using the business intelligence template. So if I just go into performance point content, and now we see in the ribbon, we have the performance point button there. So if I just click on Dashboard Designer, this now pulls up the Dashboard Designer as a click once application. Once that loads up, we see in here, there's some things in there already in the library from when I was doing some testing before. So it stores all this stuff that we're going to build now into the library. And there it is. Oh, yay. Wow, like that little. Right, that's fine. That was something else crashing. Right, so up comes Dashboard Designer. So here's my designer. Now, if I right-click on here, I already have a data connection already defined, so we don't have to do that. On my performance point content, I can right-click, and what I'll do is I'll just create two simple KPIs, one for CPU, one for memory, put that in a scorecard against the target, and then show some graphs. So in here, I'm going to right-click New, and you'll recognize this menu from before. So we'll just create a KPI. In fact, given timing, I'll show you one that I've already built. So we have available megabytes of memory. So in here, we have a target, and we map that to the average sample value, and then I've added a filter to the operating system available megabytes of memory. Here I have my target. I don't know why there's two targets in there. I might just delete that target. Which I said, actually it needs to have more than 128 megabytes of memory. And down on the scoring pattern here, I can change how this works. Decreasing is better, increasing is better, do it by variance, those sorts of things. Similarly, I've done the same with CPU. We've again targeted at the average value, and we've put it in here and said that actually if it's anything less than 90%, then that should be green. So now I'm just going to create a scorecard. I don't want to use the wizard. So remember, the scorecard contains KPIs. So we just get a blank one, so then I can just grab my two KPIs that I've just created, drop one here, drop one here, and then against my dimensions, here we have the full set of dimensions, so I'm just going to do against my monitored object, the path. It now asks me which ones I want to show. So by default, what I'll do is I'll just right-click auto-select children. So that means it's going to show everything. And then I just need to do on my view settings, just add a filter that we want to remove empty rows, and we actually only want to see these. So if there's no value in there for something, we just ignore it. Right, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a dashboard. And remember, dashboards are the final piece. So we put scorecards into dashboards, and we put reports, and we put filters into dashboards. So we'll just use this basic layout. And new dashboard, maybe we'll call it demo dash. Right, now down here on the right-hand side, we can see scorecards and reports that were already built. So I'll just drag that scorecard over there. And then I'll just publish this by deploying it up to SharePoint. It's going to ask me where I want to put this in SharePoint. So it's just going off there. We're just going to put it in the root, which is fine. We can actually change the master page, build our own master page, skin it up how we like. So our end users now are able to get in here and very quickly now see how our apps are going against our KPIs. What I can also do on this is I can now go and add a report. So I'll just quickly create a report, which is a graph. Because we all like to slice and dice and drill down on things. So along the bottom of my chart, I want to have some time. In my background, I'm going to have the average value. And for my series, I'm going to have my monitored objects path. And then I can just tweak this down a little bit, drill in, and drill into 2013. And then I'm just going to filter this because this is actually across everything. You saw how quickly the cube is on that. So we're just going to put in our performance rule. I'm going to drop a filter on that for my CPU. So you'll recognize these if you ever do anything in the data warehouse or crack open management packs. This is the unique name within the management pack. Total % processor time. Okay. All right, so that's my CPU usage across these. Go back to my scorecard, to my dashboard. I can drop my report in there. And actually, I can now link the two just by dragging like this. So I'm going to connect to monitored object path from member row, member unique name. Okay. And then I'll just redeploy. So this allows the user, when we click on an individual machine, that it will drive the graph on the right. And you can obviously get quite complicated in the linking between the various different components. So this is now going and redeploying to SharePoint. If you actually look what it does underneath the covers, it creates an ASPX page for you, and that just contains web parts with all the connectors already in there. So here we see we've knocked up our scorecard. Over here, our users can then go and see this. We can then drill in, actually just by clicking on any of these, and we can jump into, say, April. We can actually very quickly change the report types as well. So if we say, actually, always someone wants to know the detail, so we can flip it to a grid if we want, and at that point, we can click on there, and we can export it to PowerPoint or export it to Excel. We can then just change our report type back to a line chart. And because we're using the cube, and it's very good at this aggregation stuff, we've actually been able to use the raw data, so you would never be able to query this quickly in the raw data using an SSRS report against a SQL database. And for instance, we see a little spike on the 5th of April. We can drill in there, and we see actually about 1 o'clock, we saw this spike here, so I can just drill into that time. It's gone for that, because it's similar, just one data point for most things in the hour, and then we can show a bar chart. So we can get right down into the minute level on our data very quickly and traverse that hierarchy. In theory, if I've linked it correctly, yes I have, cool. We can click on the actual individual machine, and then that will drive that for that actual individual machine. And so very quickly, in 20 minutes or less, you can pull all your data together using OLAP and surface it up using performance point to your end users, so you can get a good idea of what your current trends are. So I'll hand you over now back to Gordon.
Okay.
Well done, well done.
So a complete dashboard in about 15, 20 minutes there. That wasn't bad going. So a question for you. How many people do you think would have a go at that themselves? Yeah? So about half of the room. So what we have got for you as well is for those people who don't want to do that themselves, but kind of would like to have that same kind of functionality, we've actually got to cut some of the vendors along who actually make third-party add-ons that add a capacity planning function to SCOM. So for you deep dev heads, this is the way that you can create capacity planning with your operations manager data. For you guys that kind of prefer more off-the-shelf solution, we're going to have our vendors coming up in a second. So first of all, I just want to flip back to the slide deck. Yeah. You know, we've talked about the measuring and the publishing of the data. Now we're going to kind of look at the forecasting of the data. Now, the very first thing that I want to show you is those reports that Sean came up and showed you a little while ago can also, if I can get on the right screen here. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Can also you can do forecasting within Performance Point as well. So I just kind of want to show you some typical SharePoint Performance Point reports that you kind of might see in your organisation, or you might want to try and get to. So I'm actually going to pull up a memory dashboard here. Just bear with me a second. Okay, so what I've actually got here is a typical type of application of that scorecarding. So it's one that we've done that shows things like logical disk space. We can actually look at memory as well. Notice as well that we're doing this based on application. So you remember that distributed application model that we had at the beginning called CIO Dash? Well, we've actually created a dashboard that is taking that data from that distributed application model and displaying it on the screen. Now, what we're actually using here as well is there's a little forecasting algorithm that you can use within Performance Point that allows you to look at your current data, but also look at data over a period of time. So if I want to look at what my memory is in 24 months' time, I can do a little prediction based on data I've got in my data warehouse. And you can actually see on this chart here that this is telling me that for my CIO Dash application, if I don't do something about my memory on my data warehouse server in that application, I'm actually going to run out of memory round about the latter part of next year. So I can start to use this data to accurately decide on when I need to be adding capacity to my application moving forward. So I just kind of wanted to show you that very briefly, just to show you how we can take that publishing and measuring the data, and we can start to do forecasting with that to make that, to add that element towards our capacity planning function. If I get the right button this time.
Excellent. So while we're getting that transferred over in the meantime, I do believe that our first up is, one second, I do believe our first up is going to be Mr. Martin Hoot. Martin is with OpsLogix, and he's going to be showcasing some of their information on how they do capacity. So I'm going to put this out two things first. So they've been given the wonderful challenge of represent the best part of their products in about 4 minutes or less. So they've been given a really tough challenge to be able to do this. So let's see if they can all pull this off, and we can make this happen the way that they want to be able to showcase how this all works. So for background, as we're introducing here, let's see, do you know what channel you're on? I think 4. Okay. For background here, Martin is an operations manager or CDM MVP and runs both Innovative and OpsLogix out of the Netherlands. And what they're going to be showing today is their capacity planning, their widget, as well as their dashboard extensions. And I'm going to point out as he gets ready for this that what is interesting about how they've done this is, for history within Ops Manager, back in the day when Ops Manager 2007 came out, there were some things that were undocumented and very difficult to be able to do. So let's see, and I'll continue with this. Do you need help, or what do we?
No, good. I'm going to run the video.
Okay, he's going to run the video on this one, so 1 second. So what I wanted to point out is, what you'll see from the video that he's doing here is what they've actually done is built their own widgets. And if you look at the number of vendors out there that have actually written their own widgets for Ops Manager, they're very small in number, and that's because it's a very complex thing to run. So with that, I will shut up and hand it over to Mr. Hoot.
Thank you, Cameron. And I'll make it short. I'm using a video because of the internet connection, and my screen resolution isn't working with me today, but I'll just narrate so you guys have a feeling. We're using the dashboard framework, and we're using the data warehouse of Operations Manager to really also provide you with some forecasting and trending capabilities within Operations Manager. So the first thing you do is you put in the OpsLogix capacity management pack. You have the data flowing into the DW as you would with the BI solution. You create a new dashboard, for instance, a grid layout or another type, so that you can actually start populating that grid with the widget you want to use, and one of the widgets might be the capacity widget. So in this example, I'm using a 3-cell layout. It's creating the basic structure. You'll have the option of selecting a widget. And we're going to add a widget on top to make sure that we can show a trend line, a forecast of some of the Hyper-V elements we want to know about. So we select the widgets. We get all the widgets we have installed. We do the capacity widget. And essentially, the next screen is to give you the type, a name. So we'll say like disk capacity for Hyper-V. We want to know when we run out of disk capacity for our virtual machines. Of course, we need to select an object. So in our case, it'll be a Hyper-V host, but any performance counter will work, right? So any management pack you have, third party, your own, we can just work with. So in this case, I'm selecting the Hyper-V host, which has quite some disk data on it. And then, of course, we need to pick the right perf counter to start training and forecasting about. We'll filter it down for you, so you can just take, in this case, the logical disk. We'll give you the instances. We want to know about the percentage free space, and then select the total percentage free space. This is a new screen. If you compare it to the perf widget, we say, well, with 10% free or 20% free, we'll turn it to either critical or warning if that occurs in the next 90 days. And it's a descending trend, right? It's descending towards the threshold. The date ranges from which point in time you want to start trending from. we can actually select January 1st, and then say it will show about 30 days worth of data in the current widget view, and we can actually go back and forward in the widget. So just put in these settings. It should start loading up in a few seconds, and then you can see the calculation. It says it's actually green. We're not going to hit any of these two thresholds in the next 90 days, so we're good there. So this space is good. Maybe we want to add another counter like memory. Run through the same wizard essentially. Just pick the capacity widget, and again give it a name. So in this case we'll say memory capacity for the same host. We'll say select the same object. So PCI ST2 is the host name of the Hyper-V host. Should actually go real quick because it's cached. Then say perf counter, memory in this case, but again we can pick any of the counters available to us. Available M bytes, next. And available M bytes is like megabytes, so in this case we want to say like critical if we'll have only 4 gigs of memory in the next 90 days, or 6,000 will turn it to warning. Again, descending towards the threshold. Say next, choose a date range. Again, January 1st will work fine. Want to know it for this year, start trending for the next few months. You can do longer, whatever is in your data warehouse, right? Standard, it'll be 12 months. Say 30 days, next, create. And it's actually quite fast. It'll calculate it on the fly. So in my example, memory will actually run out of in the next 90 days. So you can see that it will actually give you a warning. It says you have 35 days left, and we can actually swap it with the previous widgets to have you more in-depth view. So 35 days left, might want to add some memory, and we should be good. These are the widgets you put in your dashboard yourself. We can also create a fabricated dashboard. For instance, on Hyper-V capacity, just click Create Dashboard, select the capacity dashboard, select your type, and it'll start populating. Find all your hosts, all the instances of your class, essentially. Start calculating for the thresholds you've been given. And at a glance, see, oh, second host is actually in problem. And again, it's the memory that will run out in 35 days. So it's one of the options you have if you don't want to go the whole BI way. Just take the widget, take the dashboard, and use OM for some capacity trending and forecasting.
Brilliant. Thank you, Martin.
All right. Well done, Martin. Thank you very, very much. All right. Next, we're going to be joined by Rob Doucette with Civision. Let's see if... I do believe we are on channel 7 with you guys there, correct? We shall see. So Rob and the Civision team, he's getting ready things here as well. They also have some interesting things that are integrating very well directly into Ops Manager. What we're going to be showcasing today is actually something that directly integrates more with the Vital Signs type product, right? That's right. Excellent. So here you go, man.
So like Cameron said, this is a little more specific in terms of Hyper-V capacity planning integrated into VMM. So if you've heard with the SP1 release of VMM 2012, Microsoft's added support for third parties to provide user extensions right to the native console. So we've taken advantage of that to take some of the investments we've made with Vital Signs and Hyper-V capacity planning and provide that directly in the VMM console. And we're not only just taking advantage of the UI extensions, but we're also leveraging data that VMM has already collected. So there's nothing to install on a host, nothing to install on the virtual machine. There's no performance hit on your Hyper-V environment. So let's just take a quick look here in the VMM console. I'm selected on the all hosts group. And here Vital Signs has found about 45 tuning tips in my demo environment. And I can click through my clusters and hosts, and you'll see the list of tips is changing here as I click through. And so we only show you the tips that apply to the object that I'm selected here, whether it's a host group, a cluster, a host, or even a cloud. In the case of a cloud where we have a group of virtual machines, we don't just look at the health of the virtual machines, but also the underlying infrastructure that supports those virtual machines. So for example, the host where the virtual machine is running, if it's part of a cluster or running on a cluster shared volume, we also analyze those and present the tips that are applicable to those as well. So let's take a quick look at a couple specific tips that have been returned here. So one thing we hear a lot from our customers is that Hyper-V environments get larger and larger, and organizations are making it easier and easier to deploy VMs. It's becoming quite difficult to track down which virtual machines are actually in use and which can be removed from the environment. So we use the historical data from VMM, look at performance metrics like processor utilization, disk I/O, and network throughput to determine some candidates for virtual machines that are probably no longer in use in your environment. So these serve as pretty easy ways to potentially reclaim some resources and increase capacity in your environment. One other tip I'll show here is where we look at predicting when resources will be depleted. So here I'm showing a host, and over the last 30 days, based on the memory usage of this host, I'm presenting here that the memory will actually run out in about a week. So this is something that could be quite useful when you're trying to plan for upgrades and purchases. And we don't just present the tips, but as well, we try and give you some detailed descriptions, and we dynamically generate recommendations so that you can have some information to fix this problem. So in the case here, I have an issue here with a cluster shared volume where I'm low on disk space. And we don't just tell you that it's low on disk space, but we say here are the VMs that are being hosted by this volume and that could be impacted by an outage. And as well, we give you a very specific recommendation. Here's a virtual machine you could move from this volume to another volume that actually does have adequate capacity to get around this problem and free up some capacity on that initial volume that was showing a problem. So just to wrap up, this is something that we're going to be releasing frequent updates for and working closely with partners and customers and Hyper-V experts to improve and add more and more tips. And I'll add that this is a free add-in that we've announced this week. There's no limitations for hosts, no time trials. This is absolutely free. So hopefully you have a chance to go to our website, download it, and let us know what you think.
Well done, Rob. Well done. And excellent. And definitely not least, but last but not least, Oleg, please come on up here. So Oleg is going to be talking to us related to the Veeam V6 management pack. So one moment here. While we get Oleg set. Here you go.
I have already a microphone. I've just borrowed a lavalier one.
All right.
So.
I'm going to get your PowerPoint deck here. Just 1 second.
Okay.
All right. Which one is yours? I'm so sorry.
No.
Is it on here? No, it's not.
Hey, you have lost my deck?
I'm sorry, man. Hold on. It's here. I swear it's here. Why don't you go ahead and talk for a little bit, explain what you're going to be showing, and let me see if I can find that while we're going through this one.
Well,
So.
Hey guys, have everybody seen vMagician here? No? No?
What was the name of it?
On Expo? Have seen them on Expo?
That should be in.
We definitely need vMagician here to find my deck.
Oh, I like it though. Hold on 1 second. Here, take
Do you want my USB stick with my deck?
All right. So why don't you tell us what it does? What are we going to be
Well,
showcasing here in the meantime?
Okay, since we do not have vMagician here to find my deck, I'll be doing a demo without a single slide. I'll tell you a story. Well, close your eyes. Close your eyes. Do you have my deck?
No, keep talking.
I'll be vMagician myself, and I'll be looking for my USB stick. So, what I wanted to present you is actually a very simple solution, and I'm going to take this session from level 500 plus to level 250 or so. Well, actually, I don't want to do that without my deck. Okay, I've got an USB stick.
Okay. There we go. Hold on. All else fails, we'll load it this way. So why don't you tell them a little bit about Veeam while we get this loaded?
I believe it'll be fast enough. Come on. I believe in you.
No pressure.
You have pretty good clicking skills. I know.
Whole audience.
Come on, Cameron, do it. We believe in you. Come on.
Pushing. Hey,
Okay,
there we go.
hey, here we go. vMagic. No? F5.
Gotta love getting a crazy Russian.
That's vMagic. Please welcome Cameron Fuller, who just did vMagic. Okay. Thank you for applauding me, guys. So let's do the vMagic. What I'm going to show you right now is a very simple and effective solution that will bring capacity planning and forecasting features right into the Ops Manager console, right to the reporting pane. So We have a couple of solutions for that. If a lucky customer of Veeam software who runs VMware infrastructure, please raise your hands who have that. Oh, well, fair enough, large number of guys. You have that out of box with the Veeam management pack for VMware v6. If you're not, we have a free solution for you. And everyone will be able to use it. Okay, I'm going to show you how to do that for every single operations management installation, regardless if you have the Veeam management pack for VMware, if you have bought that or not. So to do that, all you need is COM plus VMware MP. That could be Veeam management pack for VMware v6 or Veeam extended generic report library v6, which is free and will be released in upcoming days, in a day or two, or probably 3, I don't know. Plus SQL Server Profiler, plus SQL Server Management Studio, which is the most complex instrument, which is the most complex tool in this set of tools. Okay, once we have that, let's start. Step number 0. Start SQL Server Profiler and configure it to capture stored procedures call. Step number 1. Run Veeam performance report. This could be actually any performance report that was implemented by Veeam company. It could be a generic performance report from Veeam extended generic report library, or a linked performance report from VMware performance history reports, or even a link performance report from your custom library. The only requirement is that it should be based on Veeam performance report. Step next, run it. Okay, we have logical disk 3 megabytes right here. And, well, what do we need to forecast the future? Well, probably we need a trend. Well, how can we get that? Well, we can drill down to performance details report right here. This is just a PowerPoint slide. Let's just draw it. So, we have a trend, but that's not enough. What we need to forecast the future, what we need for capacity planning is to know when this trend is going to hit the floor, make a big hole in it, and ruin all the operations. How can we do that? Okay, let's capture stored procedure call. We have our SQL Server Profiler running. So what we need to look for is a call for Veeam GRL performance get stored procedure. Well, find it, select that, copy it, and paste it into SQL Server Management Studio. Here's what we will get. That's a bit beautified call. Let's adjust it a bit. Let's declare an XML variable. Let's instruct the stored procedure to calculate trends for us. Let's enable XML output, and let's ask the stored procedure to put that output into our XML variable, and finally, let's get it. So, what we will get? What kind of XML? This one. Look for a trend element over there or over there, on the right or on the left. What do we have here? We have managed enter already. Thank you, man, for covering data warehouse in so many details. You are the best. We have ruler already. So all credits go to you. Thank you. We have A coefficient, which is for shift by vertical axis. We have B coefficient, which is for slope. And what we should do next? What? can you tell me, guys, what should we do? No? We have to solve that very complex thermodynamical 16th degree polynomial equation. So we have A, we have B. What is X? X actually is a number of data point which corresponds to your forecast horizon. So please take the number of the last sample in the record set, add the number of days to forecast the number of days left till forecast horizon, and well, you have A, you have B, you have X, and you have Y, Y. You have Y, Y, Y. What's correct in English? Y or Y? I'm Russian. I don't know.
I don't know, man. Let's see what it looks like. I want to see it.
Okay, so actually, at this point, you are done if you're using Vim Extend Generic Library approach. And if you're a lucky customer of Vim software and you have Vim management pack for VMware v6, then you have that out of box with Vim capacity planning. Here is how it looks like. Well, that is it. Pretty simple. Absolutely not a rocket science.
Thank you, Oleg.
Well done, Oleg. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. You want me to do the deck? You close this out?
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much for bearing with us. I'll get a bit of volume on there. Yeah, thank you very much for bearing with us, folks. So I hope, just to conclude this, that we've been able to show you a number of different elements. And let me just bring my final slide up just to close things out.
We're not seeing slides. Just roll with it.
And, okay, so...
Let me edit. You go.
Right. We started at the beginning. We kind of showed a little scenario. We had an angry CIO. And what we've tried to show you is how we can kind of remedy that situation by taking some of the key data, modeling it in Operations Manager, taking that data out, putting it into scorecards and charts, and we've showed you how from the ground up you can create a capacity planning dashboard. We've also showed you at the end there some third-party offerings that you might decide to use instead that will snap into either Operations Manager or Veeam. Hopefully you've got some good takeaways to go back to your business and make a difference to your IT organisation. So I've been Gordon McKenna, and you've been
Cameron Fuller.
And thank you very much for attending our sessions. Have a great MMS, folks.
Thank you.